Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see so many friendly faces. So Senator Brown and I are here today to talk about broadband, and our title is called Possibilities and Perils. So it should be an interesting conversation. So let me start out by telling you a little bit about MCNC. I know many of you heard our name over the years, but still aren't quite sure who we are and what we do. We are, in fact, a private, nonprofit based in Research Triangle Park, and we own and operate the largest gig fiber network in this state. And so there's lots of folks, I'm sure, in this room that don't really grasp what is broadband. And by that, we mean something very different than the cable you might have at home or the DSL connection you might have at home. These are high-speed fiber optic cables that run through, MCNC's fiber runs through 87 of our 100 counties. And what we do is we supply the connectivity to all 58 community colleges, all 115 school districts, all the universities, public and private, and also to many nonprofit hospital systems, public health clinics, towns, and lots of other what we call community anchor institutions. And so when we talk about possibility in North Carolina, I can tell you this, that we have a lot to discuss and a lot to work on in broadband, but we should feel great as a state that we have this incredible high-speed fiber network, highway essentially, across our state. And so I'm starting out with the good news.
Thanks, Jean. I'm Harry Brown. I grew up in the big town of Maysville, about the size of this room. And it's still about the size of this room. Had 1,000 people when I was there as a young guy, and it's still about 1,000 people. And but now I'm in the automobile industry. I have a couple of car dealerships in Jacksonville. I'm also in the insurance business. And I've been in the state senate. This will be my 15th year, my 8th term. And I represent Jones County, which is where I grew up, and Onslow County, which is where my dealerships are, the only two counties I've ever lived in. So not many of us can say that in the General Assembly, that we represent the only two places you've ever been. But I can truly say that. And it's been important, I guess, for me because I get an opportunity to see the difference between a Jones County of about 10,200 people and an Onslow County of about 200,000 people and growing and doing quite well. So it's a great comparison, I guess, for me as I work through issues in the General Assembly. And it seems like in the last 5 years I've kind of, I guess, evolved to where I want to try to help some of those poor low-wealth counties. So I've really been trying to look at ways to do that, and broadband is one of those areas that there's a big difference. And it affects our schools, it affects industry, it affects existing businesses. So there's some real concerns there, and a lot of these poor low-wealth counties now have people leaving them. So I just really have some concerns about their future. And I think broadband is one of those areas, Gene, that we can really make a difference.
Absolutely. So let me frame the conversation in saying that in terms of this ReCONNECT conversation, I think what we're talking about here, that the real challenge we have in our state is rural residential connectivity. The idea that elderly patients in their homes don't have the connectivity to be able to access telehealth services to manage their diabetes or their heart disease. The idea that our kids go home at night in these rural counties and don't have a connection, so they're not able to access all the digital resources that other kids are able to access. And so this is a real conundrum because, as you can imagine, if it was easy or anybody could make any money on building out broadband to rural communities, it would have been done. And so I think what we really need to discuss is how can the people in this room and the partnerships that we have bring to bear to some solution on fixing that residential rural broadband connectivity issue. So we're going to start out with a question. We've got a question that was sent out, and our first question is about asking you at home what choices you have for your home internet connection. So trying to get at the idea is what's available to you. And I think they're going to throw some answers up for us here soon. Okay, let me let them get that, and we'll jump onto the next first question. So this idea, Harry, that we've got challenges in our rural areas, and it's going to take all of us working together to find some creative solutions. I know that you've been working on some programs in the General Assembly. Can you tell us a little bit about this great program?
I can. It's Growing Rural Economies and Access to Technology. That's what GREAT stands for. And we looked at how we can help providers get into some of these rural areas. If the business model worked, they would already be there. I think we all know that. But it doesn't work. So in last year's budget, we put $10 million. And what we did in the bill is we put a scoring system in the bill that really, I think, challenged the providers to find partnerships to get into some of these rural areas that they haven't been able to get to before. And these partnerships gave you a better score on getting part of the $10 million. Another piece of it was the speed of the broadband. The greater the speed, the more points you would get as well. And I just got a report here today that we had 29 applications for $17 million, which I think is pretty good for our first year. And so it's going to be exciting, I think, to see how some of these partnerships will take place, where a provider might work with a co-op, electric co-op, or another partner to find a way to get broadband in some of these areas. So it's going to be fun, I think, looking at some of these applications to see how they've worked out these partnerships.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And we're really lucky to have a fantastic broadband office in state government here that's working with Senator Brown, so a lot of great resources for us. Okay, they just threw the questions up, and I saw that, and it's going to be interesting, Senator Brown and I were talking about the fact that when folks answered that question, we wish that we had put in the rural-urban qualifier, in that if you're in a rural area, do you have more than one choice? And so a lot of folks, 70%, said that yes, they do have more than one provider. So, you know, it's hard to know how many rural folks we have in the audience or how many urban folks, but that's an interesting question, right?
If you were all from Greene County, what would that answer be?
Exactly. Exactly.
Would have been different.
Great. All right, so Harry, earlier we were talking about, you were asking some questions about the MCNC backbone, and so the idea of how can folks leverage this incredible backbone that belongs to all of us here in this state. And so when the network was built, right now 3,700 miles of fiber that runs throughout North Carolina to run our network. It's an open access network, and so what that means is that anybody can come to us and say, we'd like to lease fiber on your network to provide connectivity. And so right now, and I look around the room, I see a few of our partners, especially in some of our smaller rural regions. We partner with local telephone companies. We partner with some of the electric co-ops. We partner with small wireless internet service providers to access our fiber so that they can run interesting wireless connectivity programs, so that some of the co-ops can provide broadband service in the same way that they provide electric service. And so again, I really think that the idea behind our network was to build out, take that capital cost out of the equation. So if you already have high-speed highway to the rural community, then we partner with others to build out from there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in our rural regions to have folks leverage our fiber. It's the latest technology. Because we're a nonprofit, it is very affordable with a very high service level. And so we're really optimistic about those partnerships to bring residential connectivity into the rural areas.
Gene, I was supposed to ask you that question.
That's all right here. I'm coming for it. It's a duet here. That's what they told us. So I know that legislators care a lot about jobs, job creation in rural communities. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts with economic development and some of the companies in your counties.
Well, you know, when we talk about economic development, you know, we think about roads and opportunity to provide the jobs that are needed. You know, but broadband is one of those, it seems like, is always kind of down at the bottom of the list. But I think we know today, if you don't have fast speed technology in place or broadband in place, that people just don't look. You're just not in the game.
Right, kind of a checkbox that they can't
it really
check
is.
Off.
And so you can imagine, we've got, 4 Tier 1 counties in the state, 40 more Tier 2 counties. And so think about if you're one of those 80 counties competing against the Tier 3 counties, the other 20 counties, how do you compete? Earlier today we talked about, I heard a good talk about regionalization and how you work together, and I think that's surely ought to happen. But if you're a Jones County competing against a Craven, Carteret, Onslow, Lenoir County, I know you want to work together, but still, if you have no assets to sell, how do you get something in Jones County? And even though you want to work together, you still want something coming your way. And so that's the real challenge, I think, is I think the partnerships with other counties is what's got to happen. But at the same time, you want to be able to compete with those counties to get at least some of the pie. And now I don't think that's the case for a lot of our counties.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump to the second question that we asked all of you, and that was a question about how you access the internet after work hours. So when you go home after school, after work, we gave you three choices. Do you access it using your mobile phone? Do you have to head to a library or McDonald's to access the Wi-Fi? Or are you able to get at-home connectivity? Okay, so it looks like pretty interesting to see the numbers that are so close between a home internet and a mobile phone. So, and again, these technologies have their limitations, and so again, the idea for us in rural areas would be that we'd have, competition in those marketplaces to improve the service and lower the price. Oftentimes, for many folks, those data plans that we have on our phones, that once you surpass those, you really start to become unaffordable for a lot of folks. And so, for most regions, currently, mobile access is not the ideal thing. So that's an interesting.
Interesting, though, 4%, 1 out of 20 almost, still to the library or another hotspot.
Yeah.
So I think that tells you how important this issue is.
Exactly.
In this room, it's 4%. You can imagine what it is in some of these other counties.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gene, next question I was going to ask you is, you talked about telehealth and how important it is in our rural areas. What opportunities do you see moving forward?
So believe it or not, telehealth and telehealth clinics, hospitals are the second largest user of our network. So we have a lot of folks interested and connected to our network to provide those services. This year began one of our partners, the North Carolina Telehealth Association, began as a separate 501c3, and we work with them to provide these connections. And so I think there's a lot of work going on between the Hospital Association, between the insurance companies, between DHHS, the Office of Rural Health, to really try to understand what are some of the limitations around the structure for telehealth and how we could do more to get more of those out into our rural regions. And so there's lots of interesting pilot projects going on. We've been looking at other states and the way that they've managed to improve their health outcomes in rural areas via telehealth. So I think that it's a really robust tool. We've got all the technology to do it. Now we just got to work out all the pieces in between that push it out into rural communities. Let's see, what else? We asked our questions. So Harry, what about other opportunities you said you have two kind of distinct counties. And so, what are some of the differences there and the kind of companies that have set up shop there and, the contrast in your other county?
Well, Onslow County, Camp Lejeune, you can imagine how the military drives our economy and how suppliers to the military kind of drive the economy in Onslow County. And to be quite honest, Jones County as well, because a lot of those people in Jones County will drive to Onslow County for those particular jobs, or Craven County, or Lenoir County, wherever it may be. So to get industry to come into Jones County has been a real challenge. And it's located in I think, a unique situation because it's between Onslow, Craven, Carteret, and Lenoir County. And a lot going on. If you think about the Transpark in Lenoir County, the base in Onslow County, all that's going on in Newbern, Craven County, and then the beach area in Carteret County, I think there's some great opportunities for my rural county of Jones, but it just hasn't happened. And the reason it hasn't is the infrastructure there is so poor where it comes to sewer and water and broadband that a business just can't locate there. And but it would be a great location, I think, an opportunity for a business if they were in place.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Well, let me wrap up by thanking Senator Brown for all of his work in the General Assembly to support communities and to support this broadband work under the GREAT program. Let me also give a shout out to the state's broadband office. These
Jeff
are
done a great job.
incredible people who will come out to your communities and help you access the resources to do this kind of planning and set a plan in play for your region. So we'll both be around, happy to answer any questions, but we'll keep you on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.